There is a specific silence that lives inside expensive apartments, not the honest kind, the kind born from emptiness, which at least has the decency to announce itself. This silence is furnished. It has throw pillows and an espresso machine and an unobstructed view of the Capitol dome from the 43rd floor. It smells like cedar and dry-cleaned wool, and the faint trace of a candle Elise burned alone last Tuesday. Because Tuesday had been a hard day. Owen had been in New York, and she had long since stopped waiting for him to ask how she was doing. She stands in front of the bathroom mirror now, running concealer under her eyes, with the practiced economy of a woman who has long since stopped hoping someone will notice the tired underneath. The gala starts at 8. It's 6:47. She learned this years ago, not from a book or a conversation, but from accumulated mornings and evenings that added up quietly the way debt does. How to zip your own dress, how to clasp a bracelet one-handed against the vanity edge, how to walk into a room built for couples and arrange your face into something that reads as chosen rather than left. Women don't announce when they've stopped expecting help. They just get faster at doing things alone. Elise Caldwell is 29 years old and looks like someone assembled her with intention. Dark skin. Natural hair pinned up tonight with the kind of effortless precision that takes 40 minutes to achieve. Collarbones that carry tension beautifully. Eyes that watch everything and reveal almost nothing. A professional skill she developed in law school and never quite managed to leave in the office. She pulls on the dress. Midnight blue, structured, expensive in the way that says I chose this, rather than someone bought this for me. There's a difference. She knows the difference. From the other end of the apartment comes the sound of Owen on a call. She recognizes the particular cadence immediately. Short declaratives, no laughter. The specific flatness he uses when he's negotiating something he intends to win. She's heard that voice for 3 years. She knows its rhythms the way you know the sounds of a building you've lived in long enough. The elevator that clicks on the 14th floor, the pipes that knock at 3 in the morning, the silence that settles after a call that didn't go the way he wanted. She used to appear in the doorway during those silences, used to set a glass of water on the desk beside him without saying anything, a small and wordless form of fluency between two people who understood each other. She doesn't do that anymore. She isn't sure when she stopped, only that the stopping happened gradually and then completely. She does not go out to check. 3 years ago she would have. The ceremony had been the kind of evening the legal world dresses up for once a year. The Mid-Atlantic Bar Association's annual recognition dinner, held in one of those grand hotel ballrooms that smell like polished wood and old ambition, where everyone in the room has spent the better part of their life being the smartest person somewhere and has arrived here to confirm it. Elise had gone because her firm's senior partner had asked her to represent Hargrove and Voss, and representing the firm was part of the job, and Elise Caldwell was, above all, someone who did the job correctly. She had been standing near the bar with a glass of sparkling water she didn't want, half listening to a conversation she wasn't part of. Two partners from a rival firm trading war stories about an appellate case neither of them had actually won, when someone stepped into her line of sight. Not dramatically. He hadn't tried to be noticed. Owen Blackwell had simply walked into the room with the unhurried authority of a man who has never once second-guessed whether he belonged somewhere, and Elise, who noticed everything, noticed him noticing her. The recognition was immediate and slightly inconvenient, the way a good argument is inconvenient. She didn't want to be interested, and she was. Their eyes met for 3 seconds across a room full of important people doing important things. Then he walked over, direct, no performance. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he said. "I look like I'm working," she said. "Same thing sometimes." He offered his hand. Owen Blackwell. She shook it. His grip was firm without being a statement about it, which she noted approvingly. "Elise Caldwell. International law," he said. Not a guess, he'd read her name tag. "Hargrove and Voss. Which means I'm here because Richard Hargrove asked me to be, and Richard Hargrove signs my checks." She tilted her head slightly. "You? Corporate litigation. Mercer and Cole." He said it without fanfare, the way people say things when the name is already doing enough work on its own. A firm she knew by reputation, the kind that didn't take cases so much as dismantle them. I'm here because one of the nominees is a former client, and showing up is how you remind people you exist. He said it without apology, which she found inexplicably refreshing. Can I get you something that isn't sparkling water? She laughed. Actually laughed, the real kind, not the networking kind. Something loosened in her chest that she hadn't realized was clenched. That was the beginning of it. Not a thunderclap, not a movie moment. Just a man who said exactly what he meant, and a woman who was tired of people who didn't, and 4 hours that dissolved like 40 minutes. They married 11 months later, fast by any reasonable standard. But when you're 26, and he looks at you like you're a problem worth solving, the interesting kind, and that intensity feels indistinguishable from certainty, you sign the license. You think you know the difference between a man who is focused and a man who has simply not yet run out of things more interesting to focus on. She finishes her earrings now. In the mirror, she looks composed, elegant. Every bit the partner at Hargrove and Voss she became 2 years into this marriage, largely because work had something home had stopped offering. Forward motion. The call in the other room ends. Footsteps on hardwood. Owen appears in the bathroom doorway, tall, dark-haired, the trace of silver at his temples that arrived at 34 and suited him unreasonably well. He has the kind of face that looks better in person than in photographs, which she has always found slightly unfair. The small scar along his jaw, faint from a cycling accident in his 20s, catches the light. She used to touch it without thinking. A reflex, the way you reach for a railing in the dark. He looks at her the way he has looked at her for 3 years, seeing her, and somehow not. Ready, he says. 5 minutes, she says. He nods and disappears. She turns back to the mirror. Her jaw tightens once, just briefly, then releases. A small private surrender she allows herself only when no one is watching. She presses her lips together and tells herself, as she has told herself before, that 5 more minutes is manageable. It's always the 5 more minutes you think you can survive that end up costing you the most. The Meridian International Center is a building that understands its own importance and furnishes itself accordingly. 12-foot ceilings, catering that requires 3 different serving staff per table, a string quartet playing in the corner with the polished restraint of musicians who are very good and very aware that no one is listening to them. The air itself feels curated, cool and faintly floral, the kind of atmosphere that costs money to maintain and exists specifically to make you forget that it does. Elise moves through the room the way she moves through most rooms, precisely, with purpose, scanning for the people who matter without making it obvious she's scanning. Owen is 3 feet to her left, and already being pulled toward a cluster of men in dark suits who need something from him. She watches him go with an expression that reveals nothing, then turns in the opposite direction and goes to work. There is a particular discipline that comes from spending 2 years as the unnamed half of a recognized name, and Elise has perfected it without ever deciding to. She learned early that in rooms like this one, where Owen's name appeared on the invitation and hers arrived as a courtesy, she had 2 choices: shrink into the margin or build something so undeniable that the room eventually had to rearrange itself around her. She chose the latter. She always chooses the latter. It costs more, and she pays it every time, and she has never once complained about the bill. This is something she has become quietly excellent at over the past 2 years, existing in Owen's orbit without being absorbed by it. She has her own clients, her own reputation, her own name on case filings that have made the front page of the Washington Post twice in the last 18 months. She built that. While he was on calls, while he was in boardrooms, while the apartment sat so quiet on Sunday mornings that she started going into the office just to hear something other than her own thoughts. She built that. By 9 o'clock she has had 3 substantive conversations, exchanged cards with a deputy secretary whose department she has been trying to reach for 6 weeks, and navigated 2 different men who confused her professional warmth for personal availability. Par for the course. She is reaching for a glass of champagne she doesn't particularly want when she hears her name. Elise. The voice belongs to Daniel Voss. Not a relation to her firm's Voss, a coincidence she has explained at least 100 times. A trade attorney she knows from circuit conferences. Tall, affable, with the kind of easy smile that looks like it was never taught, only grown. "Daniel." She turns toward him. And something in her loosens slightly, the particular relief of running into someone who doesn't want anything from you. "I didn't know you'd be here." Friends of someone who owed someone a favor. He gestures vaguely at the room. The usual DC alchemy. He looks genuinely pleased to see her. "How's the Meridian case? I heard it settled. Last Thursday, favorably." She allows herself a small, real smile. "I'll tell you the details when I'm allowed to." They talk. Properly. The kind of conversation where both people are actually paying attention, where no one is looking over the other's shoulder for someone more useful. He tells her about a case he lost last month that he's still not over, and she tells him exactly why she would have lost it too, and he laughs and says that's deeply unhelpful, and she says she knows, and they laugh together. It is such a simple thing being heard. She had almost forgotten the specific warmth of it. Across the room, Owen Blackwell stops mid-sentence. He has been listening to Gerald Marsh explain something about a zoning variance that will affect 3 of his DC properties. Information he should be absorbing, questions he should be forming. Instead, his attention has traveled 30 feet to the left without his permission. Elise is laughing. Not the professional laugh he recognizes from events like this one. The polite, contained version she uses when a client makes a mediocre joke. This is the other one, the one that changes the line of her jaw, the one he used to be able to produce. He is standing perfectly still, a drink in his hand, and something about the angle of her shoulders, open, unguarded, entirely unlike how she holds herself at home, lands in his chest like a key turning in a lock he didn't know was there. He watches the man she's talking to say something else, watches her lean forward slightly, like she's interested, like the conversation is worth leaning into. An unfamiliar sensation moves through Owen's chest, and he identifies it, with some effort, as discomfort. "Owen!" Gerald's voice pulls at him. "The variance. Do you want me to loop in your legal team?" "Yes," Owen says, not looking away. "Send it to my office." He watches her for another 12 seconds. Then he turns back to Gerald and finishes the conversation with the focused efficiency of a man who is very practiced at not examining things he doesn't want to examine. He drains the last of his drink. The ice has melted. At 10:30, they are in the car heading home. The leather interior. The DC streets unreeling outside the window in amber and shadow. Elise with her phone in her hand, reading something. Her face lit from below in the way that makes her look younger and somehow more distant at the same time. The silence between them has the texture of something deliberate. Not the comfortable silence of 2 people who don't need to speak, but the careful silence of 2 people who have learned which subjects to leave alone. Owen watches the road. "The Voss connection? Daniel?" he says eventually. "You know him well?" Elise glances up. "From conferences. Why?" "You were talking for a while." She considers this. Precisely the way she considers things that have layers, a half-second pause, nothing dramatic, just the slight adjustment of someone choosing their words with the same precision she'd use in a deposition. He's good at his job. Then it's refreshing to talk to someone who's actually interested in what they do. The silence that follows is not accusatory. She isn't built for accusations, isn't interested in them. It's simply the flat delivery of a fact that lands precisely because it wasn't aimed, the kind of sentence that doesn't need a raised voice to leave a mark. Owen says nothing. Elise goes back to her phone. Then it buzzes. She reads the message, and something shifts in her face. Not excitement, something quieter, something that looks like a door opening in a house where all the doors have been closed for a very long time. Her thumb stills against the screen. She doesn't smile exactly. But the particular tension she carries between her brows, the one that has been there so long it has started to feel like a feature, releases just slightly, just for a moment. Owen doesn't ask about it. He watches the road and doesn't ask, and later, much later, he will identify this as one of the specific moments he cannot get back. She tells him on a Thursday morning. Not dramatically. Elise doesn't do dramatic. She's standing at the kitchen counter with her coffee already dressed for the office when Owen comes in, still buttoning his cuff. The apartment holds the particular stillness of early morning, grey light through floor-to-ceiling windows, the faint percussion of the city 43 floors below, the smell of dark roast and the faint cedar that lives in the walls of this place like a memory. "I got an offer," she says. He reaches past her for a mug. "From who?" "The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, in Geneva." She says it evenly, her eyes on his. "They want me to lead a team advising on cross-border trafficking legislation. It's a 2-year position." Owen goes very still, the kind of stillness that isn't peace, the kind that has a shape to it. "Geneva," he says. "Geneva." He pours his coffee. She watches him process, can see the sequence of it moving behind his green eyes, the way information travels through him in categories, logistical, financial, reputational, and then last the personal. Always last. She has watched him do this for 3 years, and she stopped finding it impressive somewhere around year 2. "When did this come through?" he asks. "The official offer was Monday. I've been thinking about it." She pauses. "I wanted to think about it before I told you." 4 days. She had held it for 4 days, turned it over in her mind on the metro, at her desk, in the shower, in the particular silence of Sunday morning while he slept. And the fact that 4 days had felt necessary rather than unusual told her something she wasn't quite ready to say out loud. There was a time when she couldn't have kept something this large to herself for 4 hours, when the news would have been in her mouth before she'd even processed it herself, already reaching for her phone before she'd left the building. That woman still existed somewhere, probably. She just no longer lived in this apartment. Something in the before I told you, settles between them for a moment. 3 years ago, she would have called him from the lobby of the building the same afternoon, still in her coat, voice bright with the particular electricity of good news. The fact that she waited 4 days says everything that hasn't been said in 3 years, and they both know it, and neither of them says so. "It's a significant opportunity," Owen says, finally. "Yes. 2 years is a long time." "It is." He looks at her then, really looks at her, the kind of looking he hasn't done in longer than she can easily remember, and asks, "Are you going to accept?" She wraps both hands around her mug, takes a breath that is 1 millimeter too long. "I don't know yet," she says, but her voice is the voice of someone who does know and is not ready to say so. The first year had been difficult in ways that nobody warns you about. Not catastrophically difficult, not the kind that hands you clear evidence and an obvious exit, the slow kind, the kind that accumulates in increments small enough to dismiss individually, significant enough to bury you collectively. Owen worked. This was not a surprise. She had known exactly who he was when she married him, had found his drive genuinely compelling, had told herself that 2 ambitious people could build something together rather than simply beside each other. What she hadn't anticipated was the quality of his absence. He wasn't absent the way distracted people are absent, restless, apologetic, aware of the gap they're leaving. He was absent like a decision, deliberate, contained, complete. The lights were on. Nobody was unreachable. He was simply consistently somewhere she couldn't follow. She remembered a dinner in their 3rd month, a restaurant she had chosen, a reservation she had made, the quiet effort of selecting somewhere that actually meant something to her. She had told him about a case, complex, jurisdictional, the kind she found genuinely alive with difficulty. He had listened in the way she would later learn to recognize. Attentive on the surface, already somewhere else underneath, his eyes on her face, and his mind 3 time zones away. "You're not really here," she had said. He had frowned. "I'm sitting across from you." "I know where your body is, Owen." He hadn't had an answer for that. He had picked up his wine glass and looked at her with those green eyes and said, "I'm sorry, tell me again." And she had. And he had listened, better that time, leaning forward with the focused attention he usually reserved for depositions. And she had driven home telling herself that communication takes practice, that 2 people don't learn each other overnight, that this was just the beginning and beginnings are allowed to be imperfect. She tried again the next week, and the week after. She came to the table with patience she had to consciously pack, the way you pack something fragile, carefully, deliberately, hoping it survives the journey. She tried for 14 months. In 14 months, she had exactly 7 conversations that felt like what she had imagined marriage would feel like. 7. She had counted at some point because that's the kind of thing you do when you're a lawyer. You gather evidence, you look for patterns, you build a case even when you're hoping the verdict goes the other way. By month 15, she had stopped trying as hard. By month 20, she had restructured her expectations entirely, which is a very precise way of saying that she had begun to grieve something while it was still technically alive. Back in the kitchen, Owen sets down his mug. "We should talk about this properly," he says. "Not at 7 in the morning." "Agreed," she says, but they don't talk about it that evening. He has a call that runs late. She has a brief to finish. They eat separately, her at the counter, him at his desk, and the Geneva offer sits between them in the apartment like a third person that neither of them has introduced. The dinner plates go into the dishwasher. The lights go off room by room. The apartment performs its nightly routine of a home and no one says anything. She lies in bed that night, listening to the DC traffic 43 floors below, and does the math she has been doing for weeks. 2 years in Geneva means 2 years of distance from a marriage that has already been distant for 3. It means an office with a view of Lake Geneva, colleagues who will know her name before they know whose wife she is, mornings that belong entirely to her. It means coffee she makes for one without it feeling like evidence of something. It means the particular freedom of existing in a city where no one has a version of her that predates the woman she actually is. It means, and this is the part she circles without landing on, it might mean the end of something that ended a long time ago, just quietly, without a funeral. She closes her eyes. Somewhere in the apartment, Owen is still awake. She knows without looking, knows the specific texture of his wakefulness, the way it alters the air, a frequency she learned to read in the first months of marriage when reading him had felt like a privilege. The quality of his wakefulness is specific, like static on a channel only she can tune. A residual intimacy from a time when she used to reach across the sheets and find him. She doesn't reach. 3 years of silence has a specific architecture, not the silence of 2 people who have run out of things to say. That's a different species entirely, and at least it has the honesty of an ending. This silence has systems, schedules, her routine so intelligently designed that from the outside, and sometimes even from the inside, it almost looks like a life. The problem was never the fighting. There was almost no fighting, which turned out to be its own kind of answer. Marriages that explode leave wreckage you can point to. A specific night, a specific word, the moment the door closed too hard. But some marriages don't explode. They depressurize, slowly, incrementally, so quietly that you keep waiting for the moment it becomes a crisis, and the crisis never comes. And one day you realize the crisis was the quietness itself, that the absence of rupture was the rupture. That 2 people can share a bed, Elise, a last name, and still be living in entirely separate buildings. Year 2, February. Elise comes home to find Owen has had dinner catered for both of them. Ethiopian from the place in Adams, Morgan she discovered 6 months into their marriage. The table is set. There are candles, 3 of them, white, already lit, throwing small warm circles of light onto the good dishes he never thinks to use. She stands in the doorway, bag still on her shoulder, taking in the candles, the set table, the smell of food she hasn't had since she stopped keeping track of the things she mentioned out loud. "What's the occasion?" she asks. "No occasion," he says. "You mentioned it last week, that you missed it." She doesn't remember mentioning it, has no memory of saying it out loud, no recollection of the context, the conversation, the moment it might have slipped out. She thinks back through last week the way you thumb through a book looking for a specific line and finds nothing. And this is the thing she will never quite be able to explain to anyone. The gesture is real. He heard something she said and acted on it. By every reasonable metric that is care, attentiveness even, the kind people cite as evidence that a man is trying. But she sits across from him at the beautifully set table, eating food she loves, the injera warm and the candles steady and everything objectively, correctly good, and underneath all of it a loneliness so precise it has edges, and all she can think is, "I don't know you." 3 candles and Ethiopian food, and she still cannot find the way into him. They eat, They talk about work. She tells him she won a preliminary motion she'd been worried about, and he says that's good, Elise, and she believes him completely, and it still doesn't reach the thing underneath. She cried in the shower that night. The water ran hot, and she stood under it until the bathroom filled with steam, and the crying was the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't ask for anything because it already knows nothing is coming. Not because he was cruel, because he wasn't. Year 2, September. A weekend when his London deal was consuming him entirely. Calls at 4 in the morning, emails answered before his eyes had fully opened. The particular electric absence of a man whose body is present and whose attention is 6 time zones away. She had planned nothing for the weekend. She hadn't planned anything in a long time. On Saturday morning she made coffee for 2 out of habit, then remembered he'd left for the airport at 6, then stood in the kitchen holding 2 full mugs and laughed, one short, airless, not funny laugh, and poured one down the drain. She watched the coffee spiral and disappear, and stood there a moment longer than necessary, the empty mug still warm in her hand. She took the other mug to the couch and read for 6 hours straight. The apartment was entirely hers. The silence was entirely hers. She could hear herself think, which turned out to feel like oxygen. It was one of the better days. She hates that it was one of the better days. Year 3, March, the night she almost said it. They had been returning from an event, smaller than the gala, a birthday dinner for someone from Owen's circle, the kind of evening she attended because not attending required an explanation she didn't have the energy to construct. She had been watching DC move past the car window, all that lit ambition sliding by in amber and glass, and something about the city at night had loosened something in her chest, and the words had risen before she could organize them into something safer. I don't think this is working. She had felt them forming, had felt her mouth opening slightly, felt the specific vertigo of a truth about to break the surface after a very long time underwater. And then Owen had said, not unkindly, just matter-of-factly, in the voice he uses when he is already thinking about tomorrow, I have an early call. You? The vertigo passed. The words went back down. 7:30, she said. They went inside. She stood in the bathroom and looked at her own reflection for a long moment. Really looked, the way you look at something you're about to leave, cataloguing it without meaning to, and made a private decision that she would not fully admit to herself for another 4 months. She was done trying. Not done in the explosive way. Not with a speech, not with a confrontation, not with the clean violence of a real ending. Just done extending her hands towards something that did not extend back. Done being the only one crossing the distance. She turned off the bathroom light. She got into bed. She lay in the dark and listened to Owen brush his teeth and move through the apartment with his usual efficiency, and she felt nothing erupt in her, nothing rise or resist, just a vast and terrible calm. She was 28 years old, and she had already decided that this was what the rest of her life was going to feel like. And she had made her peace with it. That was the saddest part, not the decision. The peace. 3 weeks before the gala. The Geneva inquiry had come through a colleague, a human rights attorney named Sophie Fry, who had her number from a conference in The Hague. A brief message, professional and direct. There's a position, you'd be extraordinary for it. Is it something you'd consider? Elise had read it twice. Closed her phone, opened it and read it again. Something moved in her chest that she didn't immediately recognize, then did, with the slight disorientation of encountering something you thought you'd lost. It was want. Simple, directional, entirely her own. She had not told Owen for a week, then 2. Then the weeks accumulated into a month of preliminary conversations with Geneva, learning the scope, the team, the specific texture of what the work would require. And she had stood in her office at 9 in the evening, looking at the Capitol dome through the window, and felt for the first time in a long time something that wasn't grief. It was the feeling of a door opening onto a room that had always been hers. It was the feeling of her own name, in her own voice, being the loudest thing in the room. She is at her laptop now. The apartment is quiet in that familiar, furnished way. The cursor blinks in the reply field of Geneva's formal offer letter. She types, I am honored by this opportunity and would like to... Then she stops, deletes it, sits with her hands in her lap and the blue light of the screen on her face and the cursor blinking, patient and indifferent, waiting for her to decide who she is going to be. The apartment is silent around her. The Capitol dome glows in the distance through the window. Somewhere behind her, the door to the bedroom is closed. She tries to locate, somewhere in her chest, a reason to stay. Owen finds it by accident. He is looking for the lease document on their DuPont Circle property, a file he knows he saved, cannot locate. He opens her laptop without thinking, the way you open a cabinet in your own house. The laptop is unlocked, the email is open on the screen. Dear Ms. Caldwell, we are delighted to confirm your appointment as Senior Legal Advisor to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, effective March 15th. As discussed, the position is based in Geneva, Switzerland. We look forward to... He reads it once, then again. There is a specific quality to the moment when something you sensed but refused to name finally assembles itself into language. It doesn't feel like a revelation. It feels like a door closing, the soft final click of a mechanism completing exactly what it was built to do. He had known, had watched her at the gala, had heard the precise nothing in her voice when she said, "I don't know yet," had chosen with the practiced efficiency of a man who has spent a decade managing what he allows himself to feel, not to follow the thought to its conclusion. The email follows it for him. March 15th, 11 weeks. He sits down, not because he decides to, his knees make the decision. He sits in her chair, at her desk, surrounded by the particular order of her workspace. The color-coded legal pads, the photograph of her mother, the coffee mug with the ring stain she never bothered to clean. Details he has walked past 100 times. They land on him now with the full weight of everything he hasn't paid attention to. It moves through him in sequence. Grief comes later. First, something colder. The gala. The way she laughed with that attorney, her whole body open and unguarded. The careful flatness in her voice saying, "I don't know yet." The way she looked at him over her coffee mug that Thursday morning, her expression carrying something worse than anger. Completion, like she had arrived at the end of a calculation and was simply waiting for him to catch up. He closes the laptop, walks to the window, presses one hand flat against the glass and feels the cold move through his palm, and stands there until the city lights blur at the edges. When he hears her key in the door, he doesn't move. She comes in, sets her bag down, sees his shape in the dark. Owen? The professional neutral, giving nothing away. He turns. She sees his face. And something in her goes completely still. In 3 years, she has never seen him look like this. Unguarded in a way that makes him look younger and more real. The scar along his jaw catching the low light, his green eyes wide and stripped of the efficiency he wraps around everything. Like a man standing in a house he suddenly doesn't recognize, not because it changed, but because he finally stopped moving fast enough to see it. "You have a start date," he says. "Yes. When were you going to tell me?" "When I was ready." The silence between them is different from every silence they've shared. Those were empty. This one is pressurized, like the air before weather arrives. Elise. Her name in that voice, low, unfortified. She hasn't heard it like that since before she stopped counting the good days. "I don't." Quiet. Courtroom. Still. "Don't start a sentence you weren't going to start 6 months ago." He crosses the room and stops 3 feet from her, close enough that she has to look up slightly, close enough that she can feel the effort it costs him to stand still. And here is the thing about 3 years: the body doesn't forget. The mind builds walls, restructures, learns to need less. But the body remembers without permission. The particular gravity of him. The way the air shifts when he is close. The fact that even now, even here, he is extraordinarily difficult to look away from. "I don't want you to go," he says. The words are quiet, direct, not decorated. They land in the space between them and stay there. She looks at him for a long moment. Something crosses her face that isn't satisfaction and isn't grief. The specific exhaustion of a woman who was right about something she never wanted to be right about. "You should have thought about that," she says, "when you had time." The silence that follows is the longest one yet, And then she doesn't know who moves first. She will think about this later, and won't be able to reconstruct the sequence, only that the distance collapsed without announcement, the way things do when two people have been holding themselves apart until the holding becomes its own exhaustion. His hand finds her face. Not urgent, just certain, the way he touched her in the first year, when certainty was the only language he knew. Her breath catches. Her hand closes around his wrist, not to pull away, just to hold on to something solid. He says her name again, just that, just Elise, in the voice that belongs to no boardroom, no version of him the world gets to see. She closes her eyes. What happens next belongs only to them, to the dark apartment and the amber glow of the city, and the 11 weeks sitting on the other side of the door. It is not a solution. They both know that. But there are moments that exist outside of solutions, and this is one of them. In the morning, the light comes through the curtains in long, pale lines. She wakes before him, lies still, watching the ceiling. His arm is across her waist. She looks at the silver at his temple in the early light, the scar along his jaw. She thinks about touching it. She doesn't. She gets up quietly, goes to the kitchen, makes coffee for two, stands holding both mugs, looking out at the Capitol dome in the pale morning, trying to determine whether last night was a beginning or a goodbye dressed in the language of one. She doesn't have an answer. The cursor is still blinking on her laptop across the room, patient and indifferent, waiting for her to finish the sentence she started. She doesn't leave that night. She goes to the bedroom, closes the door, not a slam, their deliberate click. And Owen stands in the living room and doesn't follow, because he doesn't know how, which has always been the problem. But in the morning, she's still there. She's at the kitchen counter in running clothes she hasn't gone running in yet, both hands around her mug when she hears his footsteps in the hall. She gives herself one more second of the quiet. The way you finish a breath before something difficult. He comes out looking like he hasn't slept. She knows this version of him. It lives in the forward set of his shoulders, the specific weight of a man who spent the night arriving somewhere he wasn't ready to go. Neither of them speaks about what happened. The apartment holds it for them, the way rooms hold things that haven't yet been named in daylight. He sits at the kitchen table, not standing, not already moving. He sits and folds his hands and looks at her. "I need you to tell me," he says, "all of it. I want to hear it." She looks at him for a long moment. She has rehearsed versions of this conversation in the shower, at her desk, in the silence of 291 Sunday mornings. She knows every word. The question has never been whether she could say it. The question has always been whether there was anyone on the other side ready to receive it. She looks at his folded hands, at the undefended quality of his face, and she decides. She sets down her mug, and she tells him, in order. The first year, the dinners, the way she kept trying and couldn't find the door. The night she almost said, "I don't think this is working," and he asked about his cool time instead. The shower, the coffee for two, she poured down the drain. The 291 Sunday mornings watching the light change on the walls, thinking quietly that this was not what she had said yes to. She doesn't cry. But her voice carries something worn through in places, the sound of someone who has carried a weight so far and for so long that they no longer notice its shape, only its mass. Owen listens, completely still. He doesn't interrupt, doesn't defend, doesn't reach for the counter-arguments she can see him assembling and setting aside. And the longer he listens, the more his expression shifts, not to guilt, though guilt is there, to something she didn't expect. Recognition, like he is hearing a story he should have already known. She remembers the first night in this apartment. Late, after a full day of unpacking, she had been sitting on the study floor surrounded by books when he came in and sat down beside her, without asking what she was doing, without offering to help, just sitting down the way you sit beside someone whose company you want and picking up a book. He organized them wrong, fiction by region. She does it by the year she first read them. She watched him put Achebe next to Adichie and said nothing, because the wrongness of it was so entirely unexpectedly his that she felt it land in her chest like something irreversible. She had thought, "I want to figure out how to be with this person for the rest of my life," not the grand gestures, the sitting down on the floor. That version of Owen had existed. She didn't imagine him. And last night she found a trace of him again, which is, she is learning this morning, its own kind of complicated. It is one thing to grieve something you believe is gone. It is another to find it still there and have to decide what to do with that. When she finishes, the apartment is very quiet. "I didn't know," he says. "About all of it. I know you didn't. That was part of the problem. I closed off." He stops, reworks it. "When things matter to me, significantly, I retreat. It's not a strategy. I'm not sure it's even a choice." He holds her gaze. "That isn't an excuse." "I know," she says. He extends his hand across the table, not reaching, just placing it there, open, palm up, an offer without conditions. She looks at his hand. She thinks about last night, about the second mug of coffee by the machine, about Lake Geneva, and mornings that belong entirely to her, about the floor of the study and the books organized wrong. Her fingers move slightly, an involuntary reach that stops itself, a reflex her mind overrules before it completes. She doesn't take it. "I need to think," she says. He pulls his hand back, slowly, the gesture of a man accepting a verdict he knows is fair. "I know," he says, and it sounds, for the first time in a very long time, like the truth, not a concession, not a closing argument, just a man at a kitchen table, in the morning after the night that changed the shape of everything, saying the only two words he has left. It sounds like the first thing he's said in 3 years that costs him something. Here is the thing about Owen Blackwell that people do not understand about him. He is not a man without feeling. He is a man who was taught, at a specific and formative age, that feeling was a variable, something you managed, controlled, optimized toward a desired outcome. His father had run a company and a family with the same operational efficiency, which produced two things: significant financial success and sons who were very good at making decisions, and very poor at sitting in the same room as their own hearts. The Blackwell men did not discuss difficulty. They resolved it. They did not grieve losses. They conducted post-mortems, identified the failure point, and restructured. Feeling in that house was not forbidden. It was simply never modeled as something that could coexist with function. And so Owen learned, early and thoroughly, to put it somewhere it wouldn't interfere. He knows this about himself, has known it for years, in the abstract way that men sometimes know things without letting the knowing change anything. The way you can identify a structural flaw in a building and continue to live in it because the building is still standing, because nothing has fallen yet. And then Geneva got an address, and 11 weeks became 10, and the loss stopped being an abstraction and became a specific date on a specific calendar, and the building, which had been standing, which had always been standing, made a sound he had never heard it make before. Not a collapse, something quieter. The sound of a foundation that has been bearing weight for a very long time, finally, truthfully, reporting the damage. Some men only discover what they're losing when the loss acquires a departure gate. Owen Blackwell is, he is learning, one of those men. He finds this neither surprising nor forgivable. He finds it simply, devastatingly true. He tries anyway. The week after the kitchen conversation, he is home for dinner every night. Not announced, not performative, just present, in the way that presence is its own statement when absence has been the pattern. He is there when she comes in. He looks up from his laptop. He asks how her day was and waits for the actual answer instead of half listening while his eyes drift back to the screen. These are small things. He is aware they are small things. He does them anyway because small things are what he has, and he is, for the first time in 3 years, unwilling to offer nothing. On Wednesday he cooks, badly from a recipe he found and followed with the focused intensity he usually reserves for acquisitions, annotating the margins of the printed page, timing each step on his phone, approaching the reduction of a cream sauce with the same methodical seriousness he brings to term sheets. The pasta is overcooked. He puts it on the table anyway because putting it on the table is the point, not the pasta. Elise looks at it, then at him. "You made pasta," she says. "I made pasta," he agrees. "It's a little soft." "I'm aware." She eats it. She doesn't say it's good because it isn't, and she has never been built for comfortable dishonesty. She also doesn't say anything unkind, which is its own form of grace. She eats the overcooked pasta at the table they haven't both sat at for dinner, in longer than either of them could easily calculate, and partway through, he catches her almost smiling, just at the corner of her mouth, quickly suppressed, a reflex she doesn't entirely manage to contain. Something in his chest does a thing he doesn't have a name for. He catalogues it and moves on, because cataloguing and moving on is what he knows how to do, and he is trying to learn new things, but he can only learn so many at once. But she is not thawing. He can feel it, the careful maintenance of a certain temperature, not cold, just measured. She is polite, attentive in the ways she has always been attentive. She asks about his work. She tells him about hers. They exist in the same space without collision, without friction, without the pressurized silences of the weeks before. It is, he realizes one evening, watching her read at the other end of the couch with her feet tucked under her and her reading glasses on, the ones she only wears at home, the ones he has always found unreasonably endearing, what the last 3 years felt like from the outside. He had built this careful coexistence, this architecture of polite proximity. He had constructed it, brick by brick, through 3 years of calls that ran late and Sundays spent at his desk and dinners where he listened on the surface and travelled elsewhere underneath. And she had learned to live inside it so fluently that she now does it naturally, without effort, without visible cost. And he is the one standing at the edges of it, not knowing how to get in. The irony is not lost on him. He finds it more devastating than useful. On Friday, he books a table at the restaurant they went to on their first wedding anniversary, a French place in Georgetown, too expensive, requiring the kind of advance planning that signals specific intention. He tells her at breakfast across the kitchen counter with the directness that is the only mode of sincerity he knows. He doesn't frame it as a gesture, he doesn't qualify it. He just tells her and waits and tries not to manage the waiting. She looks at him. He can see her deciding something, running the quiet internal calculation she runs before every commitment, weighing the variables. Arriving at a conclusion she keeps to herself. Okay, she says. It is a small word. He treats it like the significant thing it is. Dinner is better. Something about the neutral ground of a restaurant, the structural obligation of a table set for two, the ambient noise that fills silences before they can accumulate meaning, the particular permission that exists outside the apartment's loaded rooms. They talk about a case she's preparing, a jurisdictional question she's been turning over, and he asks actual questions and listens to the actual answers and follows up, and she answers like she means it, leaning forward slightly the way she does when a subject has her full attention. For a span of time he doesn't want to measure, 40 minutes maybe less. It feels like the Bar Association dinner 3 years ago. The woman who laughed the real laugh. The 4 hours that passed like 40 minutes. The beginning of it, before he understood that he was the one who would eventually make it difficult to continue. Walking back to the car, the Georgetown sidewalk narrow and lamplit. She is close enough that their arms almost touch. Almost. The distance is so small it could be accidental. He doesn't close it. He is trying to learn the difference between pursuing and pressuring, and he is not yet certain he knows where the line is, and he will not risk getting it wrong. At the car, she stops, turns to look at him directly, in the way she has always looked at things she's about to address with full honesty. I booked my flight, she says, March 12th, 3 days before the start date. The evening folds back around them, the lamplit street, the good dinner, the 40 minutes that felt like 3 years ago. All of it recedes quietly and completely, the way warmth leaves a room when a window opens. He stands on the Georgetown sidewalk and absorbs it the way he has learned this week to absorb things, without retreating, without restructuring, without looking immediately for the next position. He just stands inside it. It costs him considerably. He opens her car door. She gets in without looking at him again. He closes the door, carefully. The way you close something you're not ready to admit may be closing for the last time, and walks around to the driver's side and sits behind the wheel and starts the car. Neither of them speaks on the way home. He drives. She looks out the window at the city moving past in amber and shadow, and he watches the road, and the date sits between them in the car like something with weight and shape and a one-way ticket. March 12th. It happens on a Tuesday. These things usually do. She is at the kitchen table with case files spread across it, the organized chaos she produces when a brief is due, and he comes home at 9 to find the apartment lit warm and her in the middle of it, shoes off, reading glasses on, a half-eaten bowl of something pushed to one side, her pen moving through a document, with the quick, decisive strokes of someone who has been thinking hard for hours and is nowhere near finished. He stops in the doorway. He has seen her like this 100 times, competent, absorbed, completely at home in her own concentration. He has walked past this version of her for 3 years without fully stopping. Tonight he stops. "Need anything?" he says. She looks up over her glasses. "Tea, actually, if you're making it." He makes it. 2 cups automatically, his hands moving through the motions before his mind finishes forming the intention. Kettle mugs, 1 sugar for her, none for him. The muscle memory of it nearly stops him. At some point across 3 years, he learned how she takes her tea so completely that his hands carry the knowledge without instruction. He wonders what else he knows about her that he has never paid proper attention to. He brings both cups to the table and sits, not at the far end, his usual position, the chair near her, inside the radius of her work. "What's the case?" he says. She tells him. Cross-border trafficking, 4 jurisdictions, 17 variables held in suspension simultaneously. He listens and asks real questions, and she answers with the particular aliveness she has when a problem is genuinely difficult. At some point she pulls a legal pad over and sketches jurisdiction maps, and he leans forward to follow her diagram, and she shifts the pad toward him without looking up, the automatic adjustment of someone sharing a workspace with someone they trust to keep up. His chair moves slightly closer. Her shoulder is 6 inches from his. This is the most intimate they have been in months, and it has nothing to do with proximity or the charged silences of recent weeks. It is this: 2 exceptionally capable people inside a hard problem together, each made more by the presence of the other. The specific electricity of 2 minds that were always well matched, finding their frequency again after a long and unnecessary silence. She is more animated than she has been in his presence in longer than he can calculate. Neither of them names it. The work holds it for them. They work for 2 hours. At 11, she leans back, pulls off her glasses, rubs the bridge of her nose. He is looking at her. She feels it and looks back. The apartment is very quiet. The kind of quiet that has temperature now, warm and close, the intimacy of 2 people who have spent 2 hours inside the same problem and emerged on the same side. "Owen," she says. Warning or invitation? She isn't entirely sure. He is close enough that she can see the green of his eyes clearly, the scar along his jaw, the tiredness around his mouth that belongs to a man working this week at something harder than any acquisition he has managed. She has studied this face across tables and through car windows, always at a remove. He is not at a remove right now. His hand moves, slow, deliberate, the carefulness of a man who has broken something and is learning to handle things differently. He tucks a loose curl behind her ear. 1 small motion. His fingers barely graze her temple. She goes very still. She is not made of stone. She married him because when he was in a room she felt the room differently, felt the specific voltage of someone whose attention, when fully given, was unlike anyone else's. 3 years of careful emotional restructuring, and it has not changed, which is its own kind of information. She puts her hand over his, stops it, doesn't move it away, just holds it there. "Don't," she says. Quiet, stripped of performance. Not if you can't be consistent. His green eyes stay steady. The not retreating costs him something visible. "I'm trying to learn how," he says. "I know." She lowers his hand with the careful motion of a woman returning something she very much wants to keep and cannot yet afford to. Sets it on the table, keeps her fingers near his for a moment, not touching, just near before pulling back. That's what makes it hard. She closes the files, stacks them, gets up. "I should sleep," she says. He doesn't say don't go. He stays at the table, and watches her collect her glasses and her organized mind, and watches her pause at the hallway entrance. She looks back once. In the look there is something she doesn't bother to conceal. Not an answer. Not a promise. Just the unguarded truth of a woman who feels more than she is currently able to act on, and lets him see it anyway. "Good night, Owen," she says. "Good night, Elise." He listens to her footsteps until they stop, sits with his elbows on the table, her jurisdiction maps still spread in her handwriting across the surface, and breathes through it. The specific discipline of a man learning at 35 what it costs to be the one who stays at the table, who does not retreat, who waits. He doesn't move for a long time. 3 days before she leaves. He goes home to Connecticut for the weekend. His parents' house, the kind of Connecticut house that announces its own stability through sheer continuity. The same furniture, the same light through the same windows. His father still taking calls from the same home office he has occupied for 30 years. Owen had not planned to say anything. He came because Washington had become too full of the specific geometry of her departure. Her suitcase in the corner of the bedroom, the slow disappearance of her things from the bathroom shelf, the apartment already beginning to practice her absence. He ends up in his father's office on Saturday afternoon. He isn't sure how. One moment he is standing in the hallway with a cup of coffee, and the next he is in the leather chair across from Robert Blackwell's desk, and the room smells like it has always smelled. Old paper and wood polish, and the particular authority of a man who has never once questioned his place in a room. And something about being back inside that smell, inside the house where he learned every pattern he has spent 3 years enacting, loosens something in his chest he hasn't been able to reach. Some things you can only see from the place where you first learned not to look. His father sets down his pen, studies him. "You look terrible." "My wife is leaving," Owen says. "For good. For Geneva. 2 years. A beat. Possibly for good. And I don't know how to ask her to stay." He hears himself say it, hears the specific shape of the admission, and something settles, the way things settle when they've been held in suspension too long. His father is quiet for a moment. "When your mother and I had our difficult years," he says, "I was working the New York deal. Never here. She had everything else." He folds his hands in a gesture Owen recognizes because he does it himself at kitchen tables in depositions whenever something costs him. One day she told me she was going to Vancouver. A month. Owen remembers this. He had been 14 and had not understood it. "I drove her to the airport," his father says. "And on the way, I told her the thing I hadn't been able to say for 2 years, that I had built our life around my work because needing her terrified me, that I had made her pay for my terror." He picks up his pen. It works if it's true. It doesn't work if it's a tactic. Owen drives back that evening, 3 hours on I-95 with the windows up and the radio off, and the kind of clarity that only arrives after someone names a thing you've been carrying unnamed for years, afraid of what it means to actually need someone. He had married a woman who was extraordinary and autonomous and utterly herself, and he had spent 3 years keeping careful distance from her because the genuine alternative, where you let someone become load-bearing, was the most frightening thing he could imagine. So he had managed the fear by withdrawing. And she had managed the withdrawal by rebuilding herself into someone who no longer needed him. He had engineered the exact outcome he was most afraid of. He had been so careful to protect himself from loss that he had made the loss inevitable. He drives. The highway unspools ahead of him, indifferent and lit. The night before she leaves. She is packing. He can hear it from the living room. The zip of a bag, the drawer that sticks slightly. The deliberate silence of someone moving through a space with the purposefulness of departure. Each sound lands with a precision that has nothing to do with volume. He knocks on the bedroom door. "Come in," she says. She is folding a dress over the bed. She looks up and waits, with the patience of a woman who is not going to make this easier for him, and who is right not to. He tells her. Not the organized version he had constructed on the drive back. Points made in sequence, a case well argued, the Owen Blackwell approach to difficult rooms. What comes out instead is messier and true, which are often the same thing. About his father. about the fear, about the specific moment 3 nights ago at the kitchen table, her case files, her glasses, her jurisdiction maps, her shoulder 6 inches from his, when he understood that he had been standing at the edge of the most important room of his life for 3 years and calling it caution. When he finishes, the room is very quiet. She is still, the dress folded in her hands. "That's true," she says finally, "isn't it?" "Yeah?" Not a speech. No. She sets the dress down, looks at him, not with the careful neutrality of the past weeks, not with the exhaustion of someone who has carried something too long, with something older. The woman who laughed at the bar association dinner, the woman who tried for 14 months, the woman who cried in the shower not because he was cruel but because he wasn't. "I'm still going to Geneva," she says. "I know. The position matters. I matter. That isn't negotiable. I know that too." He holds her gaze. "I'm not asking you not to go." He takes one breath. The breath of a man stepping off something he has been standing on for a very long time. "I'm asking if you would consider me, in whatever that looks like now." The room holds it. She picks up the dress, resumes folding it with the precise, deliberate motions of a woman finishing what she started, and he watches her hands, and he waits, without retreating, without restructuring, without looking for the next position. He just waits. It is the hardest thing he has done. "I'll think about it," she says. It is the first thing she has said in weeks that sounds like a door left open rather than a door that has finished closing. March 12th. Dulles International. The car service arrives at 9. Owen carries her bag downstairs. She lets him, which is its own small signal, the kind neither of them comments on. The lobby is already in full mid-morning motion. Doormen, dog walkers, a woman in scrubs waiting for an Uber. The ordinary machinery of a city that does not pause for private reckonings. In the car, she watches DC move past the window. 3 years of mornings and commutes and events and silence, all of it scrolling by in the grey March light. The Georgetown streets, the monuments, the 43 floors she is leaving behind. She takes inventory without sentimentality, the way you do when you are not running from something, but walking away from it with full knowledge of what you're leaving and why. She doesn't feel the grief she expected. She feels something closer to clarity, the particular weightlessness of a decision made fully and without apology. Owen is beside her. He doesn't talk. He has, she notices, stopped filling silence with the wrong things. It has taken 3 years and 11 weeks and 1 overcooked pasta dinner, but he has learned this, at least, that silence is not always a problem to be solved. At departures, the driver pulls to the curb. Owen gets out first, comes around and opens her door, a small, practiced motion that used to feel like performance and today feels simply like care, which is a distinction she has spent 3 years trying to make and is only now able to. He takes her bag from the trunk. They stand on the sidewalk in the grey March light, planes crossing the sky overhead, the white noise of the airport surrounding them like a held breath. She takes her bag from him. "Owen," she says. "Elise." She looks at him. Really looks the way she stopped letting herself look somewhere in year 2, because looking had started to cost more than she had available to spend. The familiar face, the green eyes, the scar along his jaw that she used to touch without thinking, and then stopped touching, and then one night in the amber dark of their apartment, touched again. The man she married in a rush and lived beside in silence, and is now standing in front of at an airport, 3 years older, trying to locate what is still true. She lets herself look for a long moment. She owes herself that much. "I am not the woman who will wait anymore," she says. The words arrive without heat, without accusation, just the flat, clear delivery of a woman stating something she has earned the right to state. Not as a warning, just as a fact. "I know who I am. I know what I built while you were looking the other way, and I know what it cost me, and I am not available to pay that cost again." "I understand," he says. "I need space to do this work. I need this to be mine." She holds his gaze. "I am not going to fold a life in Geneva around anything that pulls me back into the version of myself I just left behind." "I know." He holds her gaze with the steadiness she has only recently learned to trust. "That's not what I'm proposing." She waits. He reaches into his jacket, sets a boarding pass on top of her bag. quietly, without ceremony. The way he does the things that cost him the most. Geneva, same flight. Seat 14A, one row behind hers. She looks at it, then at him. "You booked a ticket," she says, 3 days ago. "You didn't tell me. I was waiting to see if you'd let me say the other things first." His voice is even, but underneath the evenness she can hear it. The specific effort of a man who has stopped managing the outcome and is simply, for the first time, showing up and letting the chips fall. "The ticket doesn't mean I'm coming. It means I wanted the option to ask." The airport moves around them, indifferent and ongoing. A family with too much luggage, a couple at the next entrance folded into each other, in the particular way of people who are not ready to let go. Elise looks at the boarding pass, looks at the man who printed it 3 days ago and said nothing, who carried it in his jacket through the car ride and the lobby and the grey March sidewalk, waiting, actually waiting without strategy, without pressure, for the right moment to place it in her hands. "New terms," she says. "New terms," he says. "You work. I don't crowd you. I find my own footing in a city I don't know, which is—" The corner of his mouth moves, almost imperceptibly. "Probably something I'm overdue for. You'd leave your firm. I'd take a leave. There's a difference." He pauses. "I've already spoken to my partners." She stares at him. Something shifts in her chest, a slow tectonic movement, the kind that doesn't announce itself until the ground has already changed. "When did you do all of this?" "The week after the kitchen table," he says simply. "The case files, the jurisdiction maps, the tea." He says it without decoration, without performance. Just the plain accounting of a man who finally understood what mattered and started moving toward it without waiting to be asked. "I didn't want to tell you until I knew whether it was true or whether it was just another thing I was managing. I needed to know the difference." She is very still. "And," she says, "it's true." The silence between them is nothing like the silences of the past 3 years. Those were hollow, furnished with avoidance and the careful architecture of two people not saying things. This one is full, warm, and pressurized, and entirely alive, the silence of something that is not an ending. And then she laughs. Not the professional laugh. Not the polite, contained version she has deployed across 1,000 rooms. The real one. The one that changes the line of her jaw. The one he heard across a bar association ballroom 3 years ago and has been trying to find his way back to ever since. It arrives without warning, bright and unguarded. And it is the most beautiful thing he has heard in 3 years, and he does not say so because he doesn't need to. She can see it on his face, and she lets herself see it, and neither of them looks away. "You are," she says, when the laugh settles, "genuinely unbelievable. I've been told. This doesn't mean everything is fixed. I know. Geneva is mine. The work is mine. You are—" She searches for the word. "Adjacent. For now." "Adjacent," he repeats. "I'll take it." She picks up her bag, looks at the boarding pass still in her hand, then tucks it into her coat pocket. A small motion that is also, quietly, a decision. She looks at him one more time. The green eyes, the scar. The man who sat down on the floor of a study and organized her books wrong and never stopped being underneath everything. The person she wanted to figure out. "You're going to need a better coat," she says. "Geneva in March is nothing like DC." Something in his face opens, not relief, not triumph. Something quieter and more durable than either. The specific expression of a man who has just understood that he has been given not a second chance but something rarer. A first chance at something real, offered by a woman who knows exactly what she's worth and has chosen, with full information and open eyes, to see what he does with it. "I'll manage," he says. "You'll try," she says. "There's a difference." She says it with the ghost of a smile, the real one still there, carried at the corner of her mouth like something she's decided to stop suppressing. She turns toward the entrance. He falls into step beside her. Not ahead, not behind. Beside. The automatic doors open. The airport receives them. Outside, the grey March sky is doing what March skies in DC always do. holding its weather in reserve, deciding nothing yet, leaving the forecast open. It is, all things considered, the right kind of beginning.